An old black cleaner walks into a board meeting and the executives laugh until she shuts down the whole company. Who the hell let that old woman in here? The Horizon Technologies boardroom immediately fell silent when Eleanor Dawson, 65, with perfectly braided gray hair and an impeccably ironed cleaning lady's uniform, opened the solid oak doors and walked in unannounced. 16 executives in suits, all white men, turned to stare at the intruder as if she had just committed a capital crime. Victor Reed, CEO of Horizon, didn't bother to look up from the documents detailing the dismissal of 300 employees. His irritated sigh cut through the silence like a razor. Ms. Dawson, this is a private meeting. If the garbage cans need emptying, come back in 2 hours. Contained laughter echoed around the room. Eleanor remained motionless, her hands calloused by decades of work firmly gripping a worn leather briefcase. I'm not here to clean up your mess, Victor. Not today. Her voice was calm, but carried a firmness that made the smiles falter. I'm here to stop you from destroying this company. The laughter erupted, now without restraint. The CFO almost choked on his coffee. The cleaner thinks she knows business, someone exclaimed. Another executive pretended to clean an invisible table. Maybe we should ask her opinion on the new market strategy too. Victor finally looked up, his face a mask of cruel amusement. Ellie, he said, using the nickname he knew she hated, you have exactly 10 seconds to leave before I call security. Although it's touching, your preoccupation with matters that are far beyond your comprehension. Eleanor didn't back down. Instead, she walked calmly to the head of the table, where Victor presided like a king on his throne. 35 years, she said, placing the folder on the table. 35 years of cleaning your rooms, listening to your meetings, watching as you systematically destroyed everything Philip Reed and I built. The mention of Victor's dead father made the CEO's smile falter for a moment. Senile madness, muttered the CEO, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Eleanor opened the folder. Perhaps this document will refresh your memory, Victor. Signed by your father and me in 1988. Horizon was not the technological giant it is today. It was just a dream and 2 engineers in a garage, a white man with access to investors and a black woman too brilliant to be publicly recognized. A yellowed document slid across the polished table. Victor's eyes widened as he recognized his father's signature. And something else. That's not possible, he whispered. What? What is it? Asked the director of operations, leaning over to see. A certificate of ownership, Eleanor replied calmly. Showing that I own 51% of the shares in Horizon Technologies. I always have. Your father convinced me to stay behind the scenes. America isn't ready for a black woman leading a technology company, he said. So I became invisible. The cleaner that no one really sees. The silence in the room was absolute now. No laughter, just the sound of 16 powerful men collectively holding their breath. How do you think I felt watching this guy, she pointed at Victor, dismantle my company piece by piece, turning it from a place of innovation into a money-making machine that discards people like garbage? Victor regained his composure, his face hardening. That's ridiculous. An old document doesn't prove anything. It's probably a forgery. I'll destroy you in the courts. Eleanor smiled for the first time. A smile that bore decades of forced patience and serene determination. You can try, Victor. But you might want to check your email first. I've just sent the company's lawyers, the board and the Securities and Exchange Commission documented proof of your financial creativity, including the $30 million you diverted to your account in the Cayman Islands. If you're enjoying this story of delayed justice, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that show how life sometimes waits for the perfect moment to balance the scales. Victor's face paled, as if all the blood had been drained out of him at once. His fingers trembled as he picked up the phone. As the room descended into controlled chaos, with executives whispering frantically amongst themselves, Eleanor remained impassive. Decades of daily humiliation finally transformed into a moment of vindication. But what no one in that room could have imagined was how far Eleanor was willing to go to reclaim what was hers. And how meticulously she had planned every detail of what would happen in the next few minutes. The meeting at Horizon Technologies quickly turned into a cold war. The mocking smiles disappeared, replaced by tense expressions as the executives looked at Eleanor with new eyes. Victor Reed, however, was not willing to accept defeat so easily. A cleaning lady with an engineering degree? Please. Victor laughed, but the sound was hollow, forced. Who in their right mind would believe that? You probably can't even explain what our company actually does. Eleanor remained unfazed. Horizon initially developed data compression algorithms for telecommunications. Now you're wasting that potential by selling user information to advertisers and reducing the quality of products to maximize quarterly profits. The silence that followed was broken by Research Director Dr. Marcus Way, a middle-aged man who seemed genuinely surprised. That's correct. Absolutely correct. Of course it is, Eleanor replied. I helped Philip develop the first algorithm. Our aim was to democratize access to information, not to monetize users' privacy. Victor hit the table hard enough to make the pens jump. Enough of this nonsense. Kyle, Cole Security. And you, he pointed at Eleanor, are going to need a lot more than a piece of scrap paper to get me out of this chair. Kyle Jenkins, the young legal director, hesitated with the phone in his hand. Victor, I really think we should check these allegations first. Now. Victor shouted, his face reddening dangerously. As Kyle reluctantly dialed, the door to the meeting room opened. A young woman of about 30 entered with determined steps, followed by a gray-haired gentleman carrying a thick briefcase. Sorry I'm late, the woman said, her gaze meeting Eleanor's with a brief smile. I'm Zoe Mitchell, Mrs. Dawson's lawyer. And this is Gerald Thompson, Philip Reed's former lawyer. Victor looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Gerald? What the hell are you doing here? The elderly lawyer adjusted his glasses, watching Victor with obvious disapproval. Fulfilling the promise I made to your father before he died. Should Mrs. Dawson ever decide to claim her rights, I would ensure that the documentation was intact and authenticated. He opened the folder, revealing stacks of carefully organized documents. Stock certificates, securities and exchange commission filings, intellectual property transfers, all in order. And they all clearly show that Eleanor Dawson is, in fact, the majority shareholder of Horizon Technologies. Victor stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. This is a conspiracy. You forged those documents. Zoe smiled coldly. Forgeries would not be acceptable to the bank that just froze your personal accounts while it investigates the unauthorized transfers you made. The same ones that Ms. Dawson has meticulously documented over the past 5 years. Victor's face paled even more. How did you? He began, but his voice faltered. Eleanor finally moved, walking slowly around the table, observing each executive with a penetrating gaze. You really think that a cleaner is invisible, don't you? That we have no brains, no ambitions, no dignity? I was here when you embezzled those funds, Victor. Cleaning your living room while you talked on the phone, thinking you were alone. She stopped next to Victor, her presence small but powerful. I was here when you planned to fire employees who had dedicated decades to the company in order to increase their executive bonuses. I was here when you decided to replace quality materials with cheap alternatives, even though you knew they would fail prematurely. One of the directors, James Parker, stood up slowly. I never agreed with those decisions, but I was the deciding vote. If what this woman says is true. That's Dr. Dawson to you, Eleanor corrected calmly. MIT, 1982. My diploma is in that folder too, if you want to check. Victor recovered enough to counterattack. Are you really going to believe this? This phony? The board will never accept this. The shareholders will panic. The board has already been notified, Zoe replied, checking her watch. They're meeting right now to vote on your immediate suspension. The meeting room turned into chaos. Some executives were desperately trying to phone their lawyers, others were going over the documents with increasingly worried expressions. Victor remained paralyzed, his mind clearly calculating every possible way out. Then his phone vibrated with a message. He read it and a slow smile spread across his face. Leaning towards Eleanor, he whispered, "You may have caught me off guard today, but this is far from over. I have powerful friends. Lawyers who will turn your life into hell. And I know things that could destroy this company completely." Eleanor looked at him calmly, but something in her gaze made Victor hesitate. "Why do you think I've waited so long to act, Victor?" she asked softly. "Do you really think I've spent 35 years mopping the floor without a plan? Without a strategy?" As the security guards finally reached the room, Victor pressed a button on his computer, smiling mischievously. Too late. The files have already been deleted. Good luck proving anything now. What Victor didn't notice was the look of understanding that passed between Eleanor and Kyle, the young legal director. Nor did he notice the subtle text message Kyle sent as soon as Victor touched his computer. The battle for Horizon Technologies had only just begun, and the invisible cleaner had planned every move long before Victor even imagined that she posed a threat. But would her planning be enough against a man willing to destroy everything just to avoid losing? The headquarters of Horizon Technologies had turned into a silent battlefield. Victor Reed walked furiously through the corridors, dismissing anyone who tried to approach him. His normally impeccable clothes were wrinkled after a sleepless night desperately trying to regain access to the company's servers. Meanwhile, in Philip Reed's old office, which Eleanor had claimed, an extraordinary meeting was underway. "We've recovered 98% of the files he tried to delete," reported Michael Chun, head of the IT department, his hand shaking slightly as he handed Eleanor a USB stick. "How did you know he'd try that?" Eleanor smiled softly. "Because Victor is predictable. Arrogant and predictable. And that's why we installed the mirrored backup system 6 months ago," added Kyle, the legal director who had now clearly changed sides. Every file Victor deleted was automatically copied to a secure server. The office door opened violently. Victor stormed in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. "I need to talk to this woman." "Alone," he demanded, ignoring the other people in the room. Eleanor watched him calmly. "Anything you have to say can be said in the presence of my colleagues." "Colleagues? You're a cleaner!" Victor shouted, completely losing his composure. "You can't just show up after decades and claim a company I built." Eleanor's eyes sparked. "That you built? Or that you inherited and then almost destroyed?" One of the men next to Victor stepped forward. "Ms. Dawson, I'm Richard Blackwell, from Blackwell Investments. We own 12% of Horizon shares and we support Mr. Reed unconditionally." The second man added, "And I represent a consortium that controls another 15%. Together, we have enough clout to make your life very difficult." Eleanor showed no concern. "Gentlemen, your credentials are impressive. Unfortunately for you, 12% plus 15% is still considerably less than 51%. "You don't understand how these things work," Victor said, regaining some of his confidence. "Business is about relationships, about trust. Who would trust a cleaner to lead a technology company worth billions?" The door opened again. A tall, elegant woman entered, followed by 4 people Eleanor recognized immediately, the most influential members of the board. "I would," said the newcomer. "Amanda Parker, Venture Capital. We've been looking to invest in companies with real innovation and integrity for years." Victor paled. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" "Sounding out a potential investment," he replied coldly. "Especially now that your creative financial history has come to light." Eleanor observed the scene with studied calm. The plan she had meticulously devised for years was unfolding exactly as predicted. "You're crazy," Victor hissed. "Without my leadership, this company will go under in 6 months." One of the board members snorted. "Actually, Victor, we've carefully analyzed Dr. Dawson's proposals for restructuring the company. They are remarkably sound." "What proposals?" Victor asked, confused. Eleanor pulled a document out of her briefcase. "The ones I sent to the board 3 days ago. After I regained access to the internal system, I had time to thoroughly analyze our strategic failures of the last 5 years." "You wouldn't be able to do that," Victor said, but his voice now betrayed uncertainty. "While you were dismantling the company I built, I wasn't just watching," Eleanor replied calmly. "I spent 4 hours a day for the last 7 years, studying every report, every spreadsheet, every email you left on your desks. And for the last 3 years, I was secretly completing my MBA online." A stunned silence filled the room. "Impossible," Victor whispered. "When you're invisible, Victor, no one questions what you're doing. How could a cleaner pose any threat?" Richard Blackwell's phone rang. He answered it, his face stiffening as he listened. When he hung up, he cast an icy glance at Victor. "You assured me there was no evidence of fraud. We've just received a warning from the Securities and Exchange Commission about possible involvement in your financial irregularities." The second investor was already discreetly moving away towards the door. Victor, cornered, launched his last desperate blow. I have information that could destroy this company. Secret contracts, deals made in the dark. If I go down, Horizon goes down with me. Eleanor finally stood up, moving closer to Victor until they were face to face. You never understood the true power of invisibility, Victor, she said, her voice calm but implacable. While you saw me cleaning rooms, I was building alliances. While you were treating me like furniture, I was documenting your every transgression. She turned to Kyle. Show him. Kyle projected a list of names onto the screen, dozens of them, including all of Victor's main allies. Meet my network of invisibles, Eleanor explained. Cleaners, receptionists, drivers, assistants, all those you've ignored, mistreated or underestimated for years. People who saw and heard everything. Victor's face lost all color as he recognized the names. People who worked for his closest contacts, his most important clients, even his investors. There isn't a single secret of yours that I don't know, Eleanor continued. There isn't a single threat you can make that I haven't anticipated. Victor staggered backwards, falling heavily into a chair. What do you want? He finally asked, defeated. Eleanor smiled, not with malice, but with a serenity that seemed to light up the room. I want to recover the company I built with your father. I want to restore its integrity and original purpose. And I want you, Victor Reed, to experience for the first time in your life what it means to be truly invisible. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of slow applause coming from the door. Everyone turned to see who had arrived. And no one was prepared for who was standing in the doorway. Standing in the doorway was an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Her eyes, vivid and penetrating, contrasted with her frail body. The silence in the room was absolute when Victor Reed paled, as if he had seen a ghost. Mother, he whispered in disbelief. Margaret Reed, 82, Philip Reed's widow, maneuvered her wheelchair into the room with unwavering dignity. Her gaze roamed the room until it landed on Eleanor, at which point her face lit up with a smile full of recognition. Ellie, she said softly. Finally. Victor staggered back. What's going on? Do you know her? Margaret nodded quietly. I've known Eleanor since she and her father developed the first algorithm in our garage. I've known her since Philip insisted that she should be his equal partner, not just an employee. And I've known her since we promised, the three of us together, that one day she would take her rightful place. You knew that all along? Victor's voice shook. Of course I knew, Victor. Margaret's voice was gentle but unyielding. Why do you think I refused to sign those documents transferring your father's shares to you? Why do you think I was so insistent that you treat all employees with dignity? Eleanor approached, kneeling beside Margaret's chair, holding her wrinkled hand. You didn't have to come, Margaret, she said softly. Yes, I did. Margaret turned to Victor. Your father would be devastated to see what you've done to his company. Not just the financial schemes, but how you treated people. As if humans were just disposable resources. Victor, cornered, tried one last defense. I turned Horizon into a global powerhouse. We tripled our market value. At the cost of what? Margaret asked. The integrity your father valued? The people who built this company? The innovation that was our real mission? The silence that followed was deafening. Victor looked around, realizing that he had lost not only control of the company, but also any moral support he could claim. Eleanor stood up, her bearing now different, no longer the submissive posture of a cleaner, but the assured presence of a leader. I'm not here to destroy you, Victor, she said calmly. I'm here to save the company your father and I built. The choice is yours. Leave quietly or face criminal charges for the financial misappropriations we've documented. The whole room held its breath. Victor looked at his mother, then at Eleanor, and finally at the executives and lawyers who were witnessing his downfall. Without saying a word, he took out his company access badge and placed it on the table. You won't last 6 months, he muttered as he passed Eleanor on his way to the door. She just smiled serenely. I lasted 35 years cleaning your toilets without you knowing who I really was. I think I could run a technology company. 3 months later, the lobby of Horizon Technologies was unrecognizable. The cold marble walls had given way to open, welcoming spaces. Employees from all departments chatted animatedly as Eleanor, in a simple but elegant suit, walked among them. Dr. Dawson. A young programmer approached, nervous but enthusiastic. "The project you approved for development, we've already got the first prototypes working." "Excellent, Daniel. I can't wait to see it," Eleanor replied, her smile genuine. As she continued her daily tour of the building, a practice she maintained even as CEO, she noticed how the employees now looked her in the eye, how genuine the smiles were, how fear had been replaced by respect. In the main meeting room, now redesigned to promote collaboration rather than hierarchy, the executive team waited. Many new faces, people promoted on merit, not connections, mingled with some of the old executives who had shown integrity. "The numbers for the quarter, Dr. Dawson," announced Jessica Zhang, the new CFO. "They're 12% above projections. And the profit-sharing program for employees is ready for implementation." Eleanor nodded, pleased. "And the Community Development Center?" "Construction starts next week," Kyle replied. "We already have over 200 young people signed up for the free programming classes." Before the meeting could continue, the door opened and Margaret Reed walked in, pushed by her nurse. Everyone stood up in respect. "Don't stop on my account," she smiled. "I've just come to see how the company my husband loved is doing." Eleanor approached, taking her friend's hand. "It's becoming what Philip dreamed of. A force for good, not just profit." That afternoon, while Eleanor was tidying up some objects in her new office, much more modest than Victor's previous one, she came across an old photo. She, Philip and Margaret, in the garage where it all began. 3 smiles, 3 dreams, a shared vision. The story of Horizon Technologies had spread quickly, becoming an emblematic case of delayed justice and corporate transformation. Victor Reed had disappeared abroad, fleeing lawsuits and public humiliation. As she placed the photo in a simple frame, Eleanor reflected on the long journey. The daily humiliations. The years of patience. The meticulous plan. "Do you know what I've learned in all these years, Margaret?" she asked, helping her friend to settle down on the office sofa. "What, dear?" "That invisibility can be the greatest power when used wisely. People who are ignored see everything. They hear everything. And when they finally speak, no one is prepared for the truth they carry." Margaret smiled, squeezing Eleanor's hand. "Philip always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met. He would be so proud today." Outside the office, employees walked past carrying boxes, the belongings from the old executive office being donated to charity. Among them, Eleanor recognized Tanya, the new cleaner, chatting animatedly with a programmer about an idea to improve the company's recycling system. "The difference," Eleanor observed, "is that now everyone is being heard." In this world full of injustice, perhaps the most powerful lesson is that dignity cannot be conferred by titles or positions. It comes from within, sustained by unwavering patience and determination. And that sometimes, in the shadows where no one bothers to look, lie the most visionary leaders, just waiting for the right moment to turn invisibility into power. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to sign up for more stories that reveal how true leadership often comes from the most unexpected places. Because in a world that values appearances, it's the overlooked people who often hold the most transformative truths.